So thank you for being here. I'm going to share a little bit of a journey with you as a scholar, right? And the work that I'm going to show you is from a lot of people, and it's Bill Cope and myself, who's my colleague, and the way we came to what we now call the 7 affordances. But I want to kind of backtrack a bit, and I want to show you an application that we've tried to kind of instantiate the kind of work that we've done, but I want it in context, right? So Bill and I are scholars around literacy mainly. That's what we do. Most of our research and our work is meaning making and how that happens. Of course, as we've shifted away from alphabetical literacy to other forms of meaning making, particularly with the digital, that's meant that we've had to stretch what that means. So that's one part of the kind of work that we bring, and I want to share that. The other part is the preparation of teachers, because that's what we do. So how do you prepare teachers? What do they need across any discipline, really? And then the third part, which is, of course, we're all part in now. I spent this morning with NCSA trying to select the deputy for NCSA. And NCSA sees itself as serving the whole campus and the nation in very important kind of ways. So what's the third part? The third part is what are the affordances of the digital and cyber and computing for meaning making, right? And what does that mean for education? So it's kind of that package, and it's important for me to put that package together in a narrative, which I'm going to share with you. So it won't be depth about any little piece of that, but the pieces that we believe really matter. And we've worked with different groups, research groups in each one of those, right? So that's what I'm going to do, and I hope it's of value to you. Hello?
I'm Jana. I work at
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, so that And I thank you for asking me to come here. Bill and I are supposed to go to Brazil today, but our visas haven't come through, and it's likely we won't be able to go. So my head is spinning from trying to find where the package is, and Bill's in Chicago trying to fight with the embassy. But anyway,
well, you can relax.
Failing.
If you'd like me to click for you or to advance.
Oh, you know, which one is it?
The left one, will it should advance for you?
This one? Right. Oh no, maybe I'll just do it this way. Okay, all right. So, I want to say something, and I keep saying this, and I feel it's important to say. It is a historic moment. There is something happening. We're in a transitional moment, and we've called it new learning. But if you go back in the literature, you'll find different periods when new learning has been a term. But there is something happening here, and CETL, I think, is part of that. I mean, bringing together our resources in order to help faculty is that somehow the way we used to do it, chalk and talk and a little bit of support, somehow isn't sufficient, and we need to pool our resources to help us think what new learning is. So partly I want to make that point, and I'm sure you agree with me. The other thing I want to say, and I know this is a silly little point, but it really matters, the things that we are used to have only got a little history. If you take the whole of human history about how we've made meaning, right, from whenever, the mass compulsory schooling and all the architecture that comes with it, curriculum, textbooks, the organisation, is a tiny piece in the history of time. We think it's everything because we grew up in it, but it isn't everything and won't be everything into the future. And tipping points, you don't know where they're going to come and how they're going to come. So I like to remind people of that, because they talk about standards, they talk about quality, and those kinds of things are about habits, and people are very reluctant to shift from that, even though students and the world is kind of moving in another direction. So we have a big task ahead of us, whether even getting our research understood, let alone being able to change people. So I just like to show that slide. The other thing which I don't have to show you is the degree to which the digital domain is becoming ubiquitous in meaning making, and this is just only languages. I'd use this for China, but even instant translation, voice to text. I mean, what's happening now in terms of meaning making around language and communication is phenomenal, and it's not just English. That is important. The other one, again, is about users. There's a lot of mythology about how many people are in this space. This is an old one, but recently it's even more important. There are more women than men, you can see there, in the internet space. There are just as more minorities than so-called white people It's not as if, we used to talk about the gap. Oh, we can't get into that because there's a big gap and we've got to stay with alphabetical literacy and stay with traditional pedagogy. But you can see, and in terms of age too, there's, quite a growing mix. In terms of educational attainment, you're seeing people with low education also kind of making meaning in this space. Likewise with income and likewise with rural and urbanity. So all those conversations we used to have about the gap and why we can't address the kinds of things that many of us are involved in are not that relevant anymore, right? And we have to make sure that we understand that point. And so the potential for ubiquitous and new learning, from the moment I came here, from when Linda Katehi encouraged me to come here, the idea was that this campus was going to be a leader. A leader. We had Plato, right? Then we dropped Plato, and how were we going to pick up on Plato again? And how was this university going to be a leader in that space? Really, that's why why we came here, why the College of Ed has been supported, the sorts of things we're doing in the College of Ed, is to say, how is this university going to be at the forefront of, again, imagining how research, teaching and learning, and service, all those domains are affected by the affordances of new technology. But it's not just the devices, and it's just not the technology. We are also pedagogues. So the other thing is, what do we know about pedagogy? So as we look at these devices, the first wave of technology just took traditional pedagogy and put it onto something that was moving, and quite often it's turned out to be more traditional than even the face-to-face, right? When you go to quizzes and kind of put your hand up with a clicker rather than a hand, even if you're aggregating data pedagogically, it's no different than what we did before, right? And I'll say more about that. Or, upload something, download it, rather than going to the library. A lot of the first wave technology was very traditional. So it does matter that we understand, when we talk about affordances of new technology, we also have in the back of our mind what we know about pedagogy. So I'm going to just go the kind of work we did. There's 3 parts to pedagogy, right? And it really matters. And the first part is that we're human beings and we're different and we engage with everything in that diversity. I don't want to use diversity the way we do politically. It's not about that. It's about meaning making, and performance equals identity and time on task. If you're a math person, do you feel you can do math? Your identity matters. If you feel you can't do it, you're not going to put the time on task, And the same goes for courting. If you feel good about yourself, you put more performance in it, you'll put more time. So the fact that we're dealing with humans is something we've got to take into account around pedagogy. And so we can talk about standards, we can talk about excellence, we can talk about whatever, but we have to address diversity in terms of engagement and transformation. And we have to track transformation, and each one will be transformed in different ways. Now, that's always been a problem for us. Carl Wyman, the man who, that's Nobel Prize winner, that paper he wrote for AERA a little while ago, a couple of years ago, said all the contextual issues for splitting an atom are known. You can control them. But the contextual issues for transforming a learner are much more complex and less known, right? And mostly set aside because we come in with curriculum and we come in with routines, right? You're not going to get transformation. And those of you who are educators know that about 60% of the effect of performance is socioeconomic background. That's before you've even entered the classroom, right? So if we're going to transform people by the little bit that we do, which is the teacher and the curriculum, which is less than the socioeconomic background, what kind of knowledge do we have, and what do we build into whatever it is that we're designing? So I'm not going to go into that. I'll leave you the notes, but I just wanted to make that first point of diversity because a lot of our work is about that, and we track, how kids engage in classrooms based on that, and that's a lot of work that we do or have done in the past with others. The other is that meaning making, right, is an act of design. Now, everybody's talking about design across campus now, but many of us have been saying for a long time, design is the framework for teaching and learning, right? And learning is a process of design. So you're born into designs, right? You're born into knowledge language, whatever, you engage with that, and as a consequence of engaging, you are transformed, but the knowledge is transformed too, right? So it's not, usually we think of grammar as a static thing with a set of rules and a set of canons that we have to understand. But we want to use a design principle, right, as part of knowing. I mean, I've come in here blind, I don't know who you are, right? And what I'm using is persuasion, right? That's all I can do. I'm trying to find things that will persuade, right? Because I don't know who you are and I don't know how to aim it. So I'm designing something and you're engaging with me on the basis of what you know. You can say, oh, what a stupid woman. Oh, she just used that word that doesn't mean anything. Oh, you are working with me with whatever you have. And it's in that engagement that something will come of it or nothing will come of it, right? You can go out feeling worse or feeling better or saying, I'm going to move on. So that's why, for us, we ask a bunch of questions around the design. And I want to put that up front, that in this space, it really matters to think in that way rather than in canons and grammar. And the third thing, equally important, is pedagogy, which is, and for us, pedagogy is knowledge processes and repertoires. There is no single pedagogy that will work. If you take the other two things as truths or realities, you know, identity and the design principle of making meaning, how can there be an ideal pedagogy? There isn't, right? So one person, 30 kids, you know, one teacher, 30 kids. We don't take any notice of that. We just take some higher order principles and then do instructional sequences, right? And maybe track individuals. And there have been historic sequences, you know, situated practice, you know, that comes from progressivism. You know, you've got to start where people are at. I haven't started with people where you're at. I don't know where you're at. I don't know how to get to a mathematician or get to a, you know, a technology. But we're told that you've got to know where your learners are and engage them either in what they know and kind of extract something from that or immerse them in something that they can understand. But we're not doing that, but that is one methodology and it's from progressivism. The other one is overt instruction, which is what I'm doing, overt instruction. I'm just coming in and I've got to start, you know, front-end loading. I'm telling you this stuff. You know, we have direct instruction. We have a whole bunch of ways in which we deal with that. It comes from a traditional pedagogy. You know, and it has naming and theories and, you know, and transmission, right? So that's direct instruction. And of course, then we have a critical framing, which is also from progressive. So we say, we need some critical thinking. So let's ask some questions, you know. So let's say, what's this for? You know, what does it do? So situated practice and critical pedagogy is from the progressivist movement that says, you know, straight direct instruction, you know, traditional pedagogy, and then a test, which isn't actually transformed practice, but it is applying accurately, right, is not enough. All I'm saying to you here is these are choices, right? And the choices based on the content area, what's appropriate, the choices based on the individual, what's appropriate where they're at, or the group, right? There isn't any single one that you can say, we will constantly always do this and it's going to work. So how do you prepare educators? How do you prepare professors who come with overt instruction and conceptualizing? That's what we all do. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to use some concepts. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to perhaps give you some readings. You know, I'm not going to do any of the other stuff. It works with adults who are predisposed and ready. That's what you've come for. You know, it'll work at some level. Will it work to transform you? I don't know. Will it work for you to transform what I've said appropriately? I don't know. Creatively, perhaps you might take it and apply it in some other kind of way. That's what we want. We want learners to be able to not only correctly apply what we've engaged them in, but also creatively and in other ways. Because that's what's called breakthroughs. That's what's creative thinking. That's what, you know, we're looking for that too. Do we capture it? Do we know about it? Do we aim for it? Right. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the three components of what we do when we train teachers.
Mary, can you say something about, when you say transform, that assumes that we kind of know what our end is, that we're transformative as opposed to something that's slower or that's traditional? Or what does transformational mean? And it seems to apply an end, and what is that?
Right. For us, transformational is that somebody enters a classroom and can't count, right? And as a consequence of engaging with you, they can count. They are transformed. That is a transformative thing. If they come in,
they learn.
They learn. That's right. That's what it means.
That's what transformation is.
Now, they can repeat counting without being able to count. That's not transformative. And we have to know the difference, right? And like, I come from a Greek background, like I'm Greek. Education in Greece is, even at the PhD, you learn the professor's textbook and learn to recite it back to them. And the closer you can recite it word for word, the higher your mark. A lot of countries do that. That's not transformative, right? It's not transformative. Although repetition is good, right? It's not transformative. You know, sometimes we do need repetition and exact repetition. So transformation, but it's not just a desire. You have to know it happens. So how do you track it? How do you know it? Do you know it by the fact that they can memorize in short-term memory and do a quiz? Short-term memory, like a ticker box? Is that transformation? That is a skill. I tell my 12-year-old granddaughter, right, who's missed a lot of schooling from problematic family background, and now she's in a very difficult school and she doesn't like what she does. I said, you have to figure out a way how to remember what you don't like just to give it back to your teacher, because you've got to get a mark to get out of this school. Right? How many people say that? Right? But that is not transformative. And I am forced to say that to her because the school is not doing that. But it's testing her every single week. So I said, figure out some ways to remember things you hate. Figure out some ways to remember things that are not meaningful to you. You know, she reads Shakespeare, she doesn't get it. It doesn't matter if you don't get it. I said, forget that you don't get it. Make some little charts. When you're sleeping, do it. Just get through the test. How much of education is like that? And here I am, the Dean of Education, saying these to you, saying that to my granddaughter, because I just want to get her through the school and I'm not there to help her. And the school, where I pay a fortune because it's a private school, expects the family to do that. Right? Because they just give them the test. Right. It's important for me to say this because whenever we talk about the digital and that other, we go to tools and devices and those kinds of things. But I want to say that when we moved to do the kinds of things that we've done next is this is where we come from. So in the architecture of a traditional classroom, and I'm not going to show it up here, show it to you now, we're sort of in it. It is very hard to achieve some of the things that I've said here you need to do. Right? Right? It is, you know, I have a little picture of a girl with, you know, you've seen this, she's got a hand on a book and she's writing over here, and we say the method of learning is it goes up here through her head, some of it sticks, and then she writes the notes down here. You know, that's the sort of the model of learning. But we're in an age where that kind of learning was okay for sorting people. Most people, we sorted them into factories or work or whatever, but now we need everybody to be problem solving and to be critical and discerning, because there's much more coming to them than what happens in the old-fashioned classroom, right? So it's an imperative, a moral imperative. So I'm sorry to do that at 100 miles an hour, but I wanted to construct that kind of, for us it's a huge, 30 years of research and 30 years of kind of work to come to those 3 slides. So, but anyway, it's called the Multi-Literacies Project. You can read it and so the affordances. So we say, if the affordances of the traditional architecture, so I've just been put on the space committee for the campus, right? Because we build brand new buildings exactly as we used to build them before, with direct instruction, kids in rows, and maybe a clicker, so we can get how many of them are on the same page, doing the same thing, right? And then we give them a quiz at the end, right? We don't give them essays so much anymore because it's too complicated and you can't scientifically grade it. And we don't grade writing, we only grade comprehension, because writing is too complex. So we get a whole bunch of kids coming to us in a country that doesn't test writing, right? And math too is a symbolic system that needs to be understood the way writing is understood, but we expect them somehow to absorb it, through particular memorizations. So now we've been predicting that there's something happening as a consequence of this thing called the digit, or the digital moment, right? For me, the most revolutionary thing is the means of manufacturing meaning, right? So to manufacture a book, you had to have typesetters, technical people who knew how to put that together. To manufacture a photograph, you need a different bunch of technical people. To manufacture audio, a different group. Now, you just click to get any system, right? Any sound, any image, and babies do it.
Yes.
The means of manufacturing meaning have been revolutionized by having the same technology for manufacturing them. And maybe smell later and some other things. Who knows? They're going to put things on you and do other sensual body kind of things too. That is the most revolutionary thing. Do we get it? Do we harness it? Do we understand it? Or do we think it's Twitter and Facebook and ban it from the classroom? It's only Twitter and Facebook because we don't do anything with it as educators. We've left it to other people to explore the affordances of that revolution, right? What are we creating with those affordances, right? What for meaning making, engagement, our discipline areas, what is across the discipline. And today when we were interviewing this man in supercomputing place, right? So they always have a little slide that says education, right? So each one of these can say, and what is education? Oh, we're teaching them computing skills, right? And we're teaching them, I say, oh yeah, that's okay, but how about general education? Are you interested in what the big data, the big research, the affordances, what it might mean for engagement, transformation, anywhere, anytime, collaborative, a whole bunch of stuff. It's not on their agenda. It's in CETL maybe, who knows? It's in, I don't know, the departments, who knows? Are we collaborating? Who knows? But what I'm going to say to you is that we have discerned, there might be others, but we have discerned 7 affordances that the digital allows us for meaning making. And I just want to share with them because they won't be surprises to you because in some way you will have heard all of this to some degree. And then I'm going to show you how we have put them in an application some of you might have seen the Scholar program. I've got an 8-minute little video where the kids are using them in school, and you will see how then we have tried to bring scientists and engineers and philosophers and to invent a platform to try this out because we couldn't get Apple to do it and we couldn't get Seattle to do it because they're doing fast things quickly for parents out there, and they've locked up the market with Moodle and blah, 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 and, it's too expensive to shift it, and, so creativity is going to come from the margins, and so we decided to put our money where our mouth is, or put IS's money where our mouth is, and we invented something. But what are these affordances? Right. And, I'm going to go through them quickly because we can come back to them. There's 7 of them, and one of them is ubiquitous learning. And I've put in here, there's a lot of data against each one of them. I'm not going to go through data. We've got some grad students that are trying to collect and aggregate the data around this affordance, right? So I've just put them. So these are the 7. Active knowledge making, multimodal meeting, recursive feedback, collaborative intelligence, better cognition, and differentiated learning. And you can see I've put, some of the data that's come through around that, and we're collecting our own data. But I'll take one at a time. Right. So ubiquitous learning, we all say that now, anywhere, anytime. You can be engaged with learning. It is possible. It doesn't only happen in one space. We know the kinds of possibilities that are there for us. And what it does too, which is very interesting and people are worried about, when people are in the cloud space or in the computing space, you can see everything they do. You know that. Google can see everything we do. We can see everything we do. There's a new kind of capacity. You might call it surveillance. You might call it tracking. You might call it whatever. In a classroom, you can't always see what everybody's doing. They're kind of doing it in their own space. But when you're working in a computer space, and particularly in the cloud space, everything that you do now not only is available anytime, but is available to others all the time too. And there's an affordance in that, a very important affordance both for the teacher and for the learner. So it's a critical, different moment. The other one is active knowledge making. A lot of data tells you that the way in which knowledge is made is by when you are participating in the creating of whatever the learning is, and that students themselves are designers of the learning, not just recipients of the learning. Again, these are things that we know. And in this kind of space, that is possible to do that. We don't any longer rely on memorizations. How many of you now memorize all the telephone numbers that you need to ring people? You don't have to do that anymore. It's available to you. You just pull out your little machine, you click it on, you speak to it, you say Jill, and Jill's telephone number comes up. So the way of accessing information is very different, and it's about artifacts now. You know, the artifacts that you can access, not so much about memorization. So yes, we do need to do memorization, but active knowledge making means you're engaging with artifacts in this ubiquitous learning space, and it shifts the balance of agency. A lot of teachers want to control what the kids do. They don't want them to have an iPad, they don't want to have a phone, because they want to still control how it goes. But the kids want to break through, the learner wants to break through, they want to go ahead. You know, they want to go to the next bit. They don't want to stay at the point that you're at. Even you do that. You know, when you're sitting in listening to a lecture, you'll pull out your phone and you might look up something that the teacher is saying or the lecturer is saying and want to move. So knowledge, you're actively involved in the knowledge making. You're not just there sitting and listening for it. It's an affordance, and it does shift the balance of agency. And it creates a different set of skills and a different sense of sensibilities in terms of the network knowledge economy. The other one is very important, is multimodal meaning making. There are journals now for medicine which are based on videos of actual operations, right? So again, these affordances allow us to engage and make meaning beyond alphabetical literacy. In fact, alphabetical literacy now is just one part of the way in which meaning making is happening in all domains. And the other domains are becoming more powerful, particularly the visual. And there's a lot of theory that says we are moving towards a visual moment. And there's a few tried examples, but I'll give them to you. Audio, you used to ring people up. It's not polite to ring people up anymore. You don't disrupt them, right? You send them a text, or even better, you send them a picture and they know what you're doing, you know? And the shift towards that is more powerful. Before we used to call, but I don't know how many of you still call people, but we don't tend to do that anymore. I'll give another example. Abu Ghraib, you know, that prison where terrible things were happening, the Red Cross had written a tome, perfect alphabetical literacy, all the data was there, it was on the website, every government had it, it was there for a very long time, nobody took any notice. Somebody came in with a little phone, went click, put it on the web. Before you knew it, the whole world was engaging with what was happening there. The power of the visual and the power of the capacity for it to circulate. We are in a different moment. Again, as educators, what are we doing with this affordance? It's not possible to prepare people adequately without preparing them for the multimodal. How to read, how to discern, how to use it, how to do it in line, not just as it's not just that there's alphabetical literacy and the rest is an add-on. There's a huge shift towards the other modes as a way of engaging, right? Huge shift. And the visual is one of the most important parts. Recursive feedback. We all know that peer-to-peer feedback, there's tons of data on it, and more data, that the more that the learner is actively engaged with each other, assessing, judging, engaging. You know, what is likes on Facebook, but peer-to-peer feedback, right? You know, the peer-to-peer is a very powerful part of the recursive feedback that helps education. And and the possibility of communicating is instant. Yourself, instructor, peers, other experts, you can bring anybody into the learning experience. The other thing in this environment is we had a pass or failure, but when you have people engaged constantly in their learning, it isn't an endpoint of failure. It's continuous engagement with the questions, with the search, with the whatever you need to know in order to get to where you want to go. So it's not finite in time, it's not finite in space. The affordance means that anywhere, anytime, anyone, all the time, right? So how do we engage with that? And given that we have evidence of everything that everybody does, we can assess and track what they're doing as they're doing it. We don't have to wait till the end for the test to know how much history they understand, or whether the problems solved the right way, or who do they go to get an answer from, right? So recursive feedback is critically important, and in this space, we don't even have to worry about plagiarism because it's detectable very quickly. You know, this idea that somehow they're going to copy from each other, you can tell right away if that's happening or not, what's happening. High order. And of course the crowdsourcing, the structured data that's available to us. Again, these are affordances that are there for us when we work in these spaces, right? They're going to create a very different kind of collaborative intelligence. We all know, I mean, in the business world, they say if you put 6 people that are the same together, you're going to get one kind of result. But if you put 6 people who are different, you're going to get a better result, right? So the more collaboration and the more diversity you bring together, the solution, the answer is going to be higher order than in the narrower kind of environment. So collaborative intelligence leads to higher standards. And also it generates the help economy about how we, all of us committed to particular problems. We have an education system that wants you to pass particular thresholds, and then we put them on, some do so well, some do not so well, some do better. But what about an education system that says everybody can get to the point that they need to get to across a continuum that might be of different order? If we can track it all, right? If we can track it, if we can intervene, if we can take one person in this direction, 2 people in that direction, that's a different kind of education system. That's the education system that's transformation for all, not how do you get some kids, to kind of pass, and other kids, if they can't do it, or learners, or I'm using kids, but it could be anybody. And this thing about cheating, again, who cares about cheating? If you're in this kind of environment, collaboration, learning from each other is much more powerful than worrying about whether somebody's going to cheat, right? And you'd be encouraging shared knowledge making because you want all of them to reach a point. It's not about differentiating people. It's a kind of more democratized goal. I mean, a different set of goals about what you want to achieve. But you see how it blows open the kind of paradigms we have about what teaching and learning is. But these affordances, I'm saying these affordances allow other things to happen. I'm saying, as an educator, they should happen, but more importantly, I'm saying they're able to happen in a way that they weren't able to happen before. We didn't have, when you're sitting like this, looking down like this, right? If you're working in a computer, you're looking at the same thing in the cloud space, talking to each other, giving access to each other, giving feedback. The teacher knows what you're doing. We're tracking it. I'll show you a little example in a minute. So it's a different kind of way of thinking about learning as peers, as collaborate, all the things we say. But this doesn't allow it. It's good, but it doesn't allow the kinds of goals we all say we want in education elsewhere. You need a different architecture, and I'm suggesting that these affordances give us this. And of course, metacognition, the reflection on what you're doing, thinking of knowledge as epistemology, and the play between, thinking about what you're actually doing and its impact and meaning in specific and broader ways, right? And transitioning from just this kind of dialogue to more collaborative dialogue. And differentiated learning, I think that's obvious. You all have to be with me, traveling with me now together, right? We can't differentiate. You've got to follow me with my words. You've got to follow me where I am. But within the cloud space, within the digital space, we can be having the same kind of engagement with you, talking to each other, adding things into it, you know, I could be focusing on you especially because you look like you might need a little jollying up, you know, I could sort of let you three go and do something else, you know. So differentiated learning is really, really important. We talk about personalised learning, the possibilities of personalised learning are greater in the digital space than they are in the real space, and we can move in and out of the physical space and the digital space. It's not about one thing. Remember when I went back, it's about repertoires of practice, and you have to choose when and how, as an educator, you put somebody in a space like this, or you might move them in a different space, or you might be in the cloud, or they might do it at home, or they might do it in the library, or you might get 3 people to help them. I mean, and you wouldn't do it on your own. The other thing is that the educators and instructors themselves could work as teams, and not just the physical ones who are here, but others as well in the enterprise of teaching and learning. So,
could I ask a question? Back on the last slide at the top, it said collaborative intelligence, but you were talking about differentiate. See in the very light at the top?
oh, collaborative intelligence, yes.
Okay, but you were talking about differentiated.
Both.
Okay.
Yes, but differentiation was this collaborative intelligence? Oh, sorry.
No, collaborative intelligence was 2 slides ago. That's why
Oh,
I'm
right.
asking.
Oh,
Yeah, I
sorry,
think it
sorry,
came up
sorry.
twice.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It might have come up twice. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. But the only thing I want to end up here before I show you that little video is nothing I've said to you you've not heard as aspirations for teaching and learning, right? We've all talked about collaborative intelligence. We've all talked about anywhere, anytime. We've talked about P2P feedback. We've talked about metacognition. These are all things that matter to us. But the architectures of teaching and learning allow some things and constrain some other things. The one teacher, 20 kids, allows some things, constrains some other things. We think that the affordances of the technology make it possible for us to rethink the way in which teaching and learning happens in the interest of the learner, 1, all learners, and 2, we don't have a choice because they're operating this way anyway for every other part of their life, whether it's entertainment or medicine, or, you know, we're talking about the new School of Medicine, which is about just-in-time, personalised learning, wherever you are, not at the clinic, crowdsourcing, the same things I'm saying about teaching and learning. That's what the new hospital, the new College of Medicine is trying to bring engineers together in an interdisciplinary to produce a different kind of College of Medicine that says the affordances of the new technology allows for a different kind of health, a different kind of medicine, more control, a shift of agency. You're not going to go 15 minutes, wait 3 hours in the hospital to be then seen by a nurse who then sends you to get aspirin, and then if you think of the waste of time. So we are talking about a new economy of effort, both in health, but we're suggesting similar things in education, right? And education is one of the sites of endeavour that changes very slowly. It has changed at a slower speed than almost every other industry site, and we have to reflect about why that is. Now, the last thing I want to do is, before we open it up to you to kind of just talk to me, is... can I just move this out of the way because I had this other thing open. How do I get this going? I can't move. Can you move it for me? That one? No? How do I move this so I can get behind it? It's behind. I can't get it.
Try hitting escape.
Oh, here it is. All right, so I just...
This tool has allowed our kids to write more than ever before. They have written more than ever before using Scholar because it allows us, with all of the tools that it offers us, to, because sometimes teachers, typically kids write 1 paper a month. This month we're writing fiction, this month we're writing argumentative essay. Now kids are writing in volume that is so much more rigorous, and gives them more experiences in their writing, which is, as a writing teacher, is absolutely a beautiful thing. Many, many years ago, a group of community members and administrators from Cal Moraine had a vision for learning that was different from the past, basically 100 years of learning. So they really wanted to commit to this phrase that we have here, learning without boundaries. So CREATE really is the product of many, many years of people coming together and thinking about what learning and education needed to transform into to prepare kids for jobs that we couldn't predict anymore. So that's really kind of in a nutshell how this kind of came to be.
A school in Wisconsin, this is one of our sites in Wisconsin, using...
You can have multiple people discussing and commenting back and forth. They're seeing things how other people see them, so you get a wide range of perspectives from kids, which makes me a better thinker. It allows for that instead of, here's what I have to say. You can take what I think and other people can comment, and you can put, again, we talk about that depth, it pushes kids thinking deeper.
We can take somebody else's goals and we can see that all on Teaching Scholar because it's in community and it's we all have an update so we can all see everybody's goals, and then we can say, okay, they really based their group about using a mentor text, and so how can we learn from that and apply it to our group?
The peer-to-peer feedback is like nothing else, because you have someone's work in front of you and you probably don't know whose it is, and it doesn't matter, because all that really matters is what they have evidence of in that place, and then the rubric, the things that we're kind of looking at and assessing them on.
We usually interact with a lot more because since it's online, it isn't as awkward meeting someone for the first time, and you have something to talk about and meet new people since you guys are both working. The beauty with Scholar is that they don't know who you are or who's the one reviewing it. By giving this constructive feedback, sometimes I go home and I talk about it and I'm like, oh, I'm not getting very good feedback because they know who I am and they're kind of biased towards me. But by using this, I'm able to see, so here's what they're going to give me, and they don't need to know who I am. And this constructive feedback helps me to improve it farther than it would have if they know who had constructed the piece. Feedback that really helps me is when I get feedback overall instead of like punctuation, you missed a period there. I like it when people give me feedback on the overall what I could work on.
When you focus on those lifelong skills and those 21st century skills, I think it better prepares kids for the world they're going into, because the truth is we have no idea what kinds of jobs these kiddos are going to have when they get out of here, and so we have to prepare them for all of that, and but also the kind of student learner who's going to create jobs. So I think that's really exciting, is when you are thinking about these kids, is really fostering skills and helping them develop skills that would allow them to in the future create new jobs and new careers that we would never imagine.
In Create, we do more of like our own pace, and I think Teaching Scholar really helps with that, because then people who maybe need a little bit more work on their writing can still get reviews, whereas people who need a little less work on their writing can also get reviews from people, and it's reflected on their writing, not just everyone in general's.
We were able to use Scholar to put that in, and other people would be able to edit and change and like make suggestions to our story. So that was one of the ways we use it in social studies. Yeah, at times the legacy classroom would get a bit boring because the students would talk and one student would talk at a time. But on Scholar, more than one person can talk, and they are able to branch out of what they usually do and share their voices. Very different from legacy, because usually we'd all be looking over something and a teacher would kind of say, oh, here's what you have to notice. Well, for this, they're able to look at it and they're able to look at the targets and see how they want to notice it.
The biggest difference going back into a legacy for me is that it's teacher directed, where this kind of, the Create kind of environment is more student led. The reins are given more to the students, where in a legacy classroom, the teacher still holds those reins.
What grade is this?
Huh?
What grade?
The analytics is a tool
it's
that
upper
is allowing
primary.
us to start
Upper
having
primary.
these insights that just even if you wanted to, it's just too overwhelming. One teacher, a bunch of papers, it's just not reasonable. But CG Scholar gives you that information, and that transforms everything. When a kid self-evaluates, here's where I think I am against this rubric, and being able to, for me to go, oh, okay, we need to talk about this because he's missing something here, he's not here, why is that? That is huge. And being able to help a kid understand where they are and where they want to be and how to get there. Mm-hmm. So a tool like CG Scholar is essential in personalizing. Absolutely. We know as teachers that we have to meet our kids at where they're at and let the kids have some more reign and voice in their learning.
We're talking about how people are either student and self-driven and can work by themselves, or are teacher-driven, and Scholar allows both of those kinds of people to work together and both achieve their goals.
I really don't think you can have a personalized, student-centered environment without first helping learners to understand who they are. Mm-hmm. So I think it starts there on a very basic level, and that requires a lot because I don't think a lot of learners have a whole lot of experience with reflecting on who they are and what they want. And I think a lot of education technologies were basically trying to recreate the didactic systems and procedures and things that we did just in an online format. But that doesn't transform learning. It's just recreating a lecture and a video. The great thing about CG Scholar is that it is not just recreating pencil and paper in an online format. That's not at all what it is. It's facilitating peer-to-peer feedback. It's facilitating collaboration. It's facilitating collaborative knowledge production. These kids are coming up and finding resources, and what does that mean? And they suddenly are curators of all these sources and trying to determine the meaning of that. And I mean, the synthesis alone is just amazing in the CG Scholar platform. And that doesn't happen on a word processor. It just doesn't happen. We came together as a community and said, look, these are our expectations of each other. This is what we want. This is the kind of mindset. We talk a lot about growth mindset and habits of mind. And so that becomes essential because otherwise when you take these walls down, if you don't have that positive environment where you're holding each other accountable, this would be very difficult work to do.
Right. I'm sorry I didn't frame that up for you, but what I wanted to show you there was how all this came. Oh, can I just stop that? Right. Right. So, remember what I said earlier about the learning by design, the multiliteracies, the diversity, the teacher as designer, the learner as a designer. Well, we moved from what we were doing in classroom with teachers into designing this platform, which we've called Scholar. And we have a number of schools and a number of sites in the university as well that's using it. But in that particular school, the children have a choice to go into a legacy classroom with the traditional curriculum, and they have a choice to go into this thing they call Create. And in that space, it's completely open plan. The teachers are a team. They're bringing in people from the outside. They have different spaces for small group meetings. They have, the kids are constantly in the cloud space. The parents are there. The teachers, the principal can come in at any point to see where they're going across all the subject areas. They've got scaffolds with and rubrics against all the subject areas, so that it isn't that there aren't standards there. We have, the Common Core standards, which are all kind of mapped out, but then there's a lot of flexibility about how individuals get there, and when teachers need to go to a particular group in order to intervene, whether it's a math problem or a history problem or whatever. And the kids live there. I hate to say this, but they live there. It's not just about going there sort of clicking in and out of periods, because the affordances allow for sociality, they allow for community, they allow for commitment, they allow for yourself being motivated to get to a certain point, not having to do what I'm asking my granddaughter to do, which is remember things she doesn't like, because there's nobody within that context to help her, because the periods are going one after the other, the textbooks are collected, the test is at the end, and the technology is used to deliver the assignments, to deliver the readings, and for them to deliver their outputs. The technology is not used on the basis of the affordances. The technology is not integrated into anything that the kids are doing in the classroom. This school is doing that. They were doing it with other platforms too before we came. We just brought Scholar in to test it. It's a test site for us to just see the sophistication of the kids, you know, when they get into that space. You know, they're just young kids, but they are very sophisticated. They know what that's doing, and they like that. This is a different generation of children than we were. Like we were, you know, the biggest issue in schools at the moment is behaviour. Why? Because we've grown different children, different people who, you know, we say, what do you want to wear? Where do you want to go? What do you want to eat? What choices do you have? Who's your friend? They're our friends, you know, rather than our kids. And then we put them in classes with authoritarian engagement. That's at the school level. At the university level, again, we have kids who are, and young people and adults who are, you know, agents who are able to kind of make decisions of a higher order before around knowledge and self, etc. And we are still stuck with the control. Now, this does not mean that standards and quality aren't there. The standards and quality have to be built into the rubrics, built into the goals. It means the affordances allow a different way of negotiating.
So I'm a little confused about the rubrics. Do the students judge their work against the rubric themselves, not the teacher judging their work?
Yes.
And so if they feel that they're not meeting the rubric, then they would approach the teacher.
They can approach anybody.
Okay.
And the rubric can be set up by anybody, again, right? So rubrics are flexible things. They can be set up by the teacher, they can set up by the principal, they can be delivered by the state, they can be done by the kids, but you do need the framework. The kids enter it and enter these spaces, and they judge each other based on the rubrics. They judge themselves based on the rubric. The teacher does it, and all this data goes up, and it can instantly give them back information as they perform. There's an analytical, I mean, the big data analytics, I didn't talk about that, but that's there as well. It's instant feedback as they go to the learner, through the analytics and through the feedback and to the teacher. The only reason I'm saying that is these are the affordances. We can do that. All we have is an example of us in our own work doing it, but the idea is anyone who's interested can create these. What do you build in them? See, when you want to work in the cloud space, when you want to invent new tools, what are the principles, what are the affordances that you ensure that you build into whatever you're doing? And those seven affordances for us is a checklist, right? So if I go back to that check. Where is it? It's back here. Right. So the degree to which whatever you're doing is ubiquitous. Does it involve active knowledge making? Is it multimodal? Does it build in recursive feedback? Does it allow for collaborative intelligence? Does it focus on the metacognition and how that's tracked? I mean, the kids track that with each other, and for the differentiated learning. These are the affordances of the new technology. These affordances in the designs that we are designing in any particular kind of instructional sequence or any particular kind of curriculum domain. How are we doing this, and what are the tools that we are inventing?
Thank you very much.